Hello, everyone. Welcome to our online webinar regarding registration. So my name is Anu Paul, and I'm here with Dean Renee Jones and with the Director of Academic Success Programs, Nina Farber. And we are here to talk about registration as a 2L and the courses you will be taking now, which are different from those you took as a 1L, and the considerations for registration for these courses that you're going to take as a 2L and then in this 3L will be more in line with exploring your interests in different practice areas and will have different influences on course selection. So first, let me just say that Dean Jones is here and she's going to talk about the considerations as well as provide insight into what you should be thinking about when you're selecting your classes. And then second, Nina will talk about whether you should consider registering for courses heavily tested on the bar exam and what you should consider in deciding whether to register for such courses. And then I'll come back and talk to you all about the registration logistics and requirements you'll need to fulfill. So I'll go over UIS, I'll share with you a little grid of the courses that are going to be offered in the fall. I'll talk about perspectives and the upper level writing requirements and some experiential information. And then we'll answer as many questions in the Q&A as time will allow. So you'll notice that the chat is disabled for this event, and we have just asked that students send their questions in the Q&A, and I will monitor the Q&A, and feel free to send your questions through there, and that's how we'll be addressing them. All right, and then I'll just reiterate that registration is on April 22nd, so make sure that you have that in your I'm sure that you have that day flagged. But with that, I will pass it on to Dean Jones.
Thanks, Anu. Okay, I just want to share some slides. Okay, so hi everybody. My name is Renee Jones and I'm a professor here at the law school. I teach corporations, securities regulation, and corporate governance, and I'm also the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs. And I'm going to share some basic advice about course selection in your second and third years. So we offer over 100 courses here at the law school, and since you can only take about 8 or 10 in any given year, it's really important that you choose those courses wisely. And in making that choice, I encourage you to do 3 things. First, please carefully review the registration materials that will be provided to you by academic services. In particular, the handbook on principles of course selection reviews the required courses that you have to take and the number of credits that you will need to graduate. Second, you should be sure to get advice about your proposed course of study. You should try to meet individually with your faculty advisor, but you should also feel free to reach out to professors who teach courses in areas in which you have an interest. Now, I know that's a little bit difficult in this current environment, but if you email a professor who teaches a course in your area of interest, I'm sure that he or she will be very happy to set up a phone call or video chat with you. So third, you should try to balance your curriculum, and you should take into account, do the next slide. You should take into account the following things. One, you need to develop a really good base of legal knowledge. You should also try to think about developing expertise in 1 or 2 areas of law. Third, you should try to broaden your horizons by trying something new, taking courses in areas of law that you haven't studied before. You should also think about the bar exam when you're choosing your courses, and Nina Farber is going to talk a little bit more about that later. And finally, as you're picking your courses next year, think about planning for clinics, externships, and even possibly international study opportunities. So where should you start? First of all, there's the courses that are required. There are not very many requirements in the second and third year, but there are a few, and they're listed here on the slide. You will have to take a course in professional responsibility before you graduate. You'll also have to take a course that satisfies the law school's perspectives on law and justice requirement, and you'll have to take a course that satisfies the upper level writing requirement, and that will give you an opportunity to write an in-depth research paper or work in more depth on your legal writing skills. And finally, depending on which jurisdiction you plan to practice in, you may have to take additional courses in experiential learning. So most of you in your 1L year will have satisfied the ABA's requirements for experiential learning credits. But if you're planning to practice in New York, for example, you will have to take 9 additional credits of experiential learning. Some of those credits you can earn during your summer job or internship, but most of you will have to sign up for at least 1 or 2 more experiential courses. So after you've figured out when you're going to take the required courses, the next thing you need to think about are the courses that almost every law student should strongly consider because they're part of the core knowledge that people expect from lawyers. So you might not have to take every one of these courses, but most people consider it advisable to take most of them. So that would include corporations, Tax 1, evidence, and criminal procedure. Fortunately, it's not going to be very difficult for you to fit these courses into your schedule because we offer them every semester, and sometimes we offer them in more than one section. So my colleague Nina Farber, as we mentioned, is going to talk more specifically about bar preparation when you're choosing your courses, and her advice will probably reinforce what I just mentioned here. So the next thing we want to think about is developing expertise. Most of you came to law school with a particular area of law that interests you, if that's the reason that you're here. So for some of you, it's corporate law. For others, it might be something like criminal justice, civil rights, or the environment. So developing expertise in these areas really requires more thought than simply signing up for a bunch of courses that are offered in the area. You really need to think about a well thought out sequence for when you're going to take these courses, because you really need to build on knowledge that's been developed in other courses. In some areas of practice, you need to have expertise across a broad array of areas of law. So for example, let's say you thought you wanted to work giving counsel to startup tech companies. Well, you might think, well, corporations would be a good course to take, and that would be correct. But if you're going to be representing, startup tech companies, you also need to take courses in a number of areas of law. You will need to know securities regulation. You'll need to understand tax. You'll need to understand intellectual property, and probably also employment law. So you really need to think about how are you going to fit all those courses in the correct sequence to take those courses in. And that's where talking to faculty will provide you some good advice. So if you talk to faculty who are teaching in these areas of law, they will help you lay out an appropriate sequence for your intended area of specialty. So the next thing I want to talk about is planning for externships and clinics. If you want to take a clinic or multiple clinics, there's a little bit more planning that's required. One of the things you should keep in mind that these are really valuable ways for you to gain practical experience, but there's some things I think you need to keep in mind when you're planning for those clinics. First of all, the clinics and the externships will also build on what you learn in your practical and your substantive courses. So it might make sense to postpone a clinic until you have a semester or 2 of basic courses under your belt. You'll get a lot more out of that clinic or externship experience if you spend your time there focusing on developing your practice skills and not as much time trying to learn an area of law that you haven't studied. Some of our clinics do have prerequisites, so you have to keep that in mind if you're planning to pursue a certain clinic. And the other thing I want you to keep in mind when you're planning your clinics and externships is that if they do take up a lot of credits in the semester that you take them. So if you spend too much time in your next 2 years in clinics and externships, it will sort of interfere with your goal of developing foundational knowledge and knowledge in your area of expertise. Because if you take so many credits, it doesn't leave enough time to take those other courses. So the final objectives that I want to cover is taking advantage of special opportunities and broadening your perspective. So the first thing I want to talk about is our requirement for the Perspectives in Law and Justice courses. I'm sure you've noticed already in your first year that understanding the law is about much more than just learning about rules and their applications. Many aspects of law reflect cultural, philosophical, economic, and historical themes that by themselves make really fascinating areas of study. And the courses that fulfill our Perspectives on Law and Justice requirement meet that objective. We do also offer a special concentration in tax. So if you're interested in tax as an area of specialty, we offer this concentration, which requires you to take a sequence of courses during your second and third year. So if you're interested in pursuing that, it's important to plan now, and you should contact Professor Diane Ring at ring@bc.edu, and she can give you advice about the text concentration. Now, we also offer opportunities to study abroad. We have exchange opportunities in Germany, France, and Ireland. So we're not exactly sure how the current travel restrictions are going to affect those programs, but if you're interested in this possibility, you should contact Susan Simone Kang, and her email address is simonka@bc.edu. She'll be able to help you decide when would be the right time to go abroad and what programs might suit your interests. So that's my general advice on course selection. I'm going to now turn it over to Nina, who's going to talk about how to think about bar preparation when choosing your courses. So Nina, I'm going to share this.
I'll just wait. Okay, great.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. If you haven't met me yet, I'm the new Director of Academic Success Programs here at Boston College Law School. I'm just going to talk a little bit about what you should think about in terms of the bar exam in selecting courses. So just let me tell you a little bit about the bar exam first. There are three main areas of the bar exam that you should think about. There's the MBE, which is the multiple choice section. There's the MEE, which is the multi-state essay exam, and then there's the MPT. I'm not really going to talk about the MPT because that doesn't involve doctrinal subject areas. We do have one class, and if you are, I'll talk about that a little bit later, that can prepare you in part for the MPT, but for now I just want to talk about what doctrinal subject areas could help you in terms of preparing for the multiple choice section and the essay sections of the bar exam. So first, the multiple choice section, the MBE. There are 200 questions, and there's 7 subject areas. You've already taken now all but 2 of the subject areas, or all but 1.5. So they're the first year topics: civil procedure, torts, real property, contracts, and con law. And then the last 2 are criminal law and procedure. So you've had criminal law and criminal procedure, and then evidence. The procedure part of crim is actually the more heavily tested part of criminal law and procedure on the bar exam. So that's why you really want to think about criminal procedure as well as evidence. Then we have the multi-state essay exam. This is a part of the exam that is 6 30-minute essay questions, and there are 12 possible subject areas. So we have the first 7 that I talked about, and then we've got conflicts of law, business associations, family law, trust and estates, and secured transactions in the UCC. So you'll see then that Crim Pro and evidence are tested both on the multi-state multiple choice section of the bar exam as well as the essay portion, which is why Dean Jones had those courses highlighted in that slide of hers, and why really you should think seriously about taking these courses. And in fact, really you should just have a good reason not to take them if you're not going to take them. Also think about taking at least one of the remaining essay sections, and that essay topics. So that's the conflicts of law, business association, family law, trust and estates, and Article 9, secured transactions, the Uniform Commercial Code. Just so you don't have to teach yourself so many subject areas right before the bar exam, and that's why I recommend that you take at least one of those. Chances are that one of those are going to fit into your desired area of interest, so that's probably not going to be hard. Also, if you're not feeling comfortable about how much you really can teach yourself before the bar exam, you probably want to think about taking an additional 1 or 2 of them as well. And it may be that even additional 1 or 2 of them will fit well into your into your practice area, into your interest area. It's also important to make sure that your schedule includes enough big classes with issue spotter exams. This is a skill that you need in order to pass the bar exam. And it's best to spread these classes out over the next 2 years. So you don't want to load any one semester with too many clinics and externships. They're great and they're important in learning a lot about the practical skills that you'll need as a lawyer. But you also gain important analytical skills in these big doctrinal subjects that will not only serve you well on the exam, but also in practice. The last thing I really want to talk about, well, actually second to last, is when you will take professional responsibility. You don't necessarily need to take it when you take the MPRE, but it's probably easier to pass the MPRE if you take the MPRE right after you've taken professional responsibility. Ideally, you want to take the MPRE early, so think about taking professional responsibility early as well. Our recommendation is to take it no later than the fall of your 3rd year of law school. This is just not something that you want to be worrying about in the last semester of law school. And just finally, because I brought it up, the MPT, which is the final portion of the exam, which does not test your knowledge. You're given the law and given an assignment like a lawyer in real practice. So if you are not comfortable about those skills, and those skills are skills that you've already been learning in your legal writing class, and if you take another advanced writing class that involves application of these kinds of principles in terms of writing briefs, or if you're in a clinic, you will get those skills. But we do have a class for students who do not feel comfortable about those skills, and that's offered in the 1st semester of your 2nd year, and that's called Legal Analysis for Practice. So that's really all I have to say right now, and I will hand it back off to Anu.
Thank you, Nina. So I am going to do a bit of a screen share with you guys and do some live demonstration to answer some of the questions that I've received in the chat already about registration logistics. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you. Okay. So this first page that I have open here is a look at the university's website for the Office of Student Services on how to register for courses. So this is very helpful in terms of learning how to use UIS and finding even the link to download UIS onto your computer. The one thing I will mention is that when you are using UIS, you will have to be, and you are off campus, you will have to use your Eagle VPN and BC two-step verification process. So there's a link right here at the top of the page that opens up into another page that shows you how to get in through your VPN. And so this is essential for the day of. I would recommend setting this up and having it running smoothly on your computer far in advance of registration. Maybe that weekend, just get, or like a couple days before, just give it a try, download it, and make sure that you can open UIS and sign in while you're off campus, because that'll alleviate a lot of the stress and pressure on the day of. The other materials that are available here are there's some registration videos that you can watch, and then there's this sort of step-by-step how to use UIS. So you can search for courses on there. You can also save specific courses, and you can drop courses as well, and it walks you through that, and then it walks you through any kind of error messages that you might see. So I recommend spending some time looking at these instructions on your own, and we will, when we send the registration materials, the official registration materials to you, include a link to this page and maybe some further instructions that could be helpful for you. So that's the first part of it, sort of the UIS logistics part. The second thing I wanted to share with you all was from our law school homepage. If you go to bc.edu/law, this is the page, our landing page for the law school. And I'm gonna go ahead and click on this little caret that says information for current students. And this is going to take me to a place where I can see sort of the academic page for course selection that I need. So I would go right here, I'll open it up in a new tab, And then this area is going to be updated with the fall 2020 schedule and the spring 2021 schedule. So before this webinar started, if you had registered prior, like before probably about noon, if you had registered around before, I'd say 1:45, you would have received an email that had the link to the UIS instructions and a course grid of classes that will be offered in the fall and in the spring. So this is a listing of the classes that will be offered in the fall, but it doesn't have the times and the days and the schedule of where they're going to be held yet. That is still being worked on by our office, and we're trying our best to get that out to you as soon as possible. I think that an official schedule will be available to you next week, and that will have all of the other parts of it filled in with like the time and the dates. But you can see these are the classes that are being offered in the fall. These are the ones that are going to be offered in the spring. And so you can get a sense of, maybe how you're going to think about what you're going to register for in both semesters of the fall and spring next year. Okay, back to this page. Sorry, a lot of tabs open. Back to this page with the course selection materials. So I'm also going to highlight this principles of course selection here. So I have that open as well. And this kind of reviews a lot of the materials that Dean Jones went over and some of the stuff that Nina had mentioned, but it's really worth your while to take a look at this. It's recently has been updated. I know it says 2019, 2020 on the top, but it'll be updated for this year as well and available on there. But it was recently updated with by Dean Jones to really target some of the points that she had mentioned to you just now. So it's a good resource to use and a tool to be aware of. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close out of that. And now back to the screen, it says the graduation requirements. So courses that meet graduation requirements. So there's 3 big requirements that you'll hear about when you're doing a degree audit with someone from academic and student services. That's something that really usually happens around your 3L year. And just to make sure that all the ducks are in a row for graduation. So the 3 big ones are the upper level writing requirement, the experiential learning requirement, and the perspectives requirement at BC. So I have each of these documents open here in these tabs, and these are the documents that we had updated for this school year, so 2019 fall and 2020 spring. And these will also be updated and circulated to you when we get the registration materials, like the full official schedule, out to you. These we'll also send along an updated version of these. So you can see here that these are the classes that satisfy the experiential learning requirement. And as Dean Jones mentioned, that you need 6 hours for the ABA, and then if you're doing something more in a different jurisdiction like New York, you would need 9 additional hours. So this is just a list here, and then the perspectives list I'll show you here. I think I had a question in the chat about whether a particular class counted towards perspectives. So this is where you would sort of get that information. And then the last one here is the upper level writing requirement. So these are the classes that you could take. The updated schedule will, or this updated list will list the classes you'll be able to take in the fall and the spring of classes that will satisfy the upper level writing requirement. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and go back to this page here. So this is the one from, I went to current students, and this is the page that opened up. So here is where you find course selection, but also more in academics. And this takes you to the academic and student services page. And I just wanted to highlight this because it has information on ExamSoft, course selection, any documents and forms that you may need from our office are now available in PDF fillable format here on this webpage. And let's see, let me stop my screen share for a second and make sure that I showed you all everything that I wanted to. All right, and let me, 1 second. Okay, I went over the academic and student services website, the requirements. Okay, the one thing I want to reiterate as well is that you should be having those meetings with your faculty advisors. And I think that that's something that has been mentioned to you all a lot, I'm sure. And I hope that you are taking advantage of the advice that they can give you. And forthcoming will be a survey about that experience because I know Dean Ring is very interested in knowing about, to make that a very fruitful experience for all students. So there will be a student experience survey that's going to be sent out after registration or around the time of registration that asks you to give us feedback on how that experience went for you. So do take advantage of the resources that your faculty advisors can provide for you. Okay, so that pretty much answers or covers everything that I had to share in terms of logistics. I'm going to answer another question that came up in the chat just now, and it says here, and feel free to send more questions to the chat now. Sort of the substantive portion of what we're going to share with you is has been done already. So now it's just kind of that Q&A portion. So it says, I'm a little confused on how we know what to register for. Is there a required course that we have to take in a given particular semester? So no. So the answer to that is no. So 2L and 3L year, as long as you fulfill all of the requirements, upper level writing, experiential, and perspectives, there's no specific requirement of you have to take that as a 2L, you have to take that as a 3L, or you have to take that in one specific semester. But that being said, there are, I know Dean Jones mentioned that it's important to think about when you would want to take a particular class, like say if it was a clinic, maybe that's something that you want to take a little bit later when you have more experience. So there are factors at play, but there's no specific, you have to get it done by a particular time. I think one good question that came up, I think Dean Jones, you'll have something good to say about this, is if OCI is moved to January of next year, fall grades become particularly important. Can you talk about choosing courses in light of this change and what you would recommend doing? It seems like it may be a good idea to save harder courses for next spring.
Okay, am I unmuted? All right,
No,
am I unmuted now?
Yeah.
So I guess, that's a difficult question because this is a kind of unprecedented time, but I usually don't recommend that people choose their courses in terms of looking for a strategy to increase their GPA. I think that employers are really looking for students who challenge themselves, who take challenging courses and do well in them. And so I would basically seek a balance. And so I think Nina had a very good description that you want to take some solid foundational courses where there are traditional exams, because your employers are going to want to look at how you perform in those courses that have a traditional issue spotter, legal analysis exams. Then you should also take courses that fit within your interests and fit within your career goals. So a strategy is saying, well, this will boost my GPA. That might succeed, but the employers are not just looking at your GPA. They're looking at the courses that you take, and they're looking to see that you take challenging courses and that you did well in them. So that strategy that you would think, well, I have a better GPA, just might not succeed depending on where you're seeking employment. So I would think about, I wouldn't overload myself. I never recommend that students overload themselves with really a lot of demanding courses, but I do think it's important to seek a balance. Does Nina or Anu have comments on that?
I would just echo what you say. I think that's the advice you gave was really good and sound. Yeah.
Okay.
I would second that, and I would also say that in terms of OCI, we don't even know if how many grades or we don't know when it's going to occur. So it may occur in January, it might occur earlier, and so it'd be important if you don't have your grades before you go into those interviews. It will be important for them to see that you are challenging yourself, and so that will be more important than what grades you get. So you should also think about that. And I second everything Dean Jones said about taking challenging courses, and pretty much employers see through trying to take courses that just will increase your GPA. They really can see that. So don't use that as an objective.
Right. Great. Okay, here's a question that says, can you elaborate why Tax 1 is highly recommended? I didn't hear it listed as one of the additional subjects tested on the essay portion of the bar.
Sure, I'm happy to address that question. The reason it's highly recommended is that it's an area of law that every lawyer has to be familiar with, meaning that every lawyer needs to know the basics of the income tax system, regardless of what area of law you're going to practice in. For example, if you want to go to business law, if you want to go into government, and in almost every area, understanding tax law is important. And again, it's a type of course that employers are going to look for on your transcript. And the other reason I think you should take Tax 1 is that, nobody really knows if they want to be a tax lawyer until they take Tax 1. So a lot of students take Tax 1 and realize this is fascinating, this is interesting, I love this. It's much more interesting than I could have ever imagined. And then they end up pursuing a career in tax. And we have a really strong lineup of tax professors here, so that's just another good reason to take the course. But these are areas of law that no matter who you talk to as a lawyer, people are going to expect you to understand these areas of law. That's why.
Yeah. Great.
I'd like to add something to that, just
Sure,
from
go ahead.
of somebody who, unlike Dean Jones, who is a real finance person, I was much more of a litigator. And I initially only took Tax 1 because the professor's English accent reminded me of my grandfather who just passed away. I ended up loving the course. I didn't go into finance, but it was a great foundation. It provided incredible analytical skills, and it taught me a lot about just the policies behind how our tax laws work. It's a lot more policy than math or anything like that. So if you're thinking that I'm just a liberal arts person and I'm never going to be interested in tax, that just is not true.
Yeah, I will also mention that Liz Rossolo, who does many of the degree audits, often tells students about Tax 1 in terms of like a lawyer who's going to have a career with, longevity. You might need that, and as your career sort of develops, the sort of foundational materials that you learn in Tax 1 can really help and support that throughout. The next question is about whether, I know that on the fall schedule, some of them say that they're closed, the courses are closed. That's, should not be, I think maybe you're looking it up on the online course schedule on, through the portal. So since the new schedule has not been released yet, that's not necessarily the case. So the classes will be open once the schedule is released and you have your registration times. Okay, let's see. This one says, roughly how many credits should we be aiming for each semester?
So the minimum is 12, right? And the maximum is 17. So you want to have something in between, obviously. And it's fine to take the minimum, but if you take the minimum in one semester, then you're obviously going to have to take more courses later on. So I think it really depends on your individual situation. But I think, and then maybe you can say most people register for like 12, 14 courses a semester, and 17 is a lot. And again, you can't go over 17.
Okay, I'm just monitoring questions and seeing what else is coming up that's everybody is asking.
When do people get their registration times? That's a popular question. And if you
Yeah.
that.
So I just asked Teresa because I don't have I myself don't know when that's going to happen. But I do believe that the students will get an email with like a specific registration time. It's just not come out yet. But I'm happy to follow up on that in the email that we send to students, because this webinar will be recorded and shared with all students. So we have a list of everybody who's registered for the webinar, and I will share information on that afterwards. How many academic credits do you recommend taking if you're doing an externship or clinic?
So again, every clinic is for a different number of credits, and the same with respect to externships. But I do think for most clinics and externships, you're going to take either 2 or 3 other courses while you're taking it. So again, you just don't want to overload yourself. And you also want to make sure that as you're planning your semesters and the semesters that you're taking clinics, that you're also mindful of meeting the academic requirements, and also still taking courses that are challenging. So a lot of people who are in clinics are also taking evidence because they're required to take evidence if they want to do litigation, and evidence is a very challenging course. So again, that's a good way of balancing out the practical experience with still satisfying, that goal of taking as many of the foundational courses as you can during your 3 years.
And then somebody just answered in here that the registration times are already posted on the Agora portal under Academic Advisor. So if you sign in and look at Academic Advisor, you should have your registration time there. All right, any further questions that folks want to send in?
So I want to just address one question that I see, which is there's courses listed on the website on Agora. So those courses are basically rolled over from last year. So what's on the website under course selection isn't necessarily reflecting the courses that we're going to offer next year. It's a good resource for the types of courses that might be offered, but it's not exactly what's going to be offered. So until we update our UIS, the information that's being shown there is basically reflective of what happened last year. So again, we're going to be getting that information out to you very shortly, hopefully early next week, and then you'll have all the information you need to make your course selection decisions. And how many credits do you need to graduate? Anu, do you want to grab that one? I know you said at the beginning.
85. 85 are needed to graduate. Will we get an email when the website is updated with the courses offered? Yes, you will get a notification. I think the earliest registration time, don't quote me on this one, I think is either 8 o'clock or 8:30. I think that's when it starts. Yeah, I think that's right. Classes are taught every other year.
Was that a question about white collar crime?
This one's about, I noticed some of the classes that are taught every other year or so aren't listed. Will those be added? Admiralty law. There's a white collar as well.
You mean listed as to whether they're going to be taught in the following year? So I'm not sure. Let me just try to address that question. So there are a number of courses that are popular, but the enrollments aren't sufficient to justify offering them every year. And then there's some professors who teach courses here that sort of rotate or flip every other year. So that's why we have those every other year courses. So they're on sort of an every other year schedule. So we can tell you what's being taught next year, but we can't really guarantee what's going to be taught in the following year. But again, those courses that are on the every other year schedule, we try to cover those in the principles of course selection. So that's where you'll see that information. with respect to white collar crime, that is every other year. The professor teaches and switches between death penalty law and white collar crime. So I believe it's going to be going, I think it's going back to white collar next year. We offer other courses in criminal law, upper level criminal law, like prosecutorial ethics and other similar courses where even if white collar crime is not offered, there still are some advanced criminal law courses. Admiralty law is a course that we used to offer. We're not offering it anymore, so that's not likely to be offered either next year or in the following academic year.
And then there was a question at the beginning about restorative justice, whether that counts for perspectives on law and justice.
Yeah, so that course does not satisfy that requirement. The list of courses that it has to be an upper level course, and this is the one that's mentioned as a 1L course. But if you look at the list, which is representative of the courses that do meet that requirement, you'll see the courses that met the requirement last year, and then we're going to be updating it, so you'll see next year which of the courses satisfy that requirement. And we always make sure that we have a very good range and selection of courses that do meet that perspectives requirement.
And then there's a question here about, in the presentation, it said that corporations, Tax 1, Evidence, and CrimPro are the recommended classes, but there was some discrepancy in the materials. In the email, it said it was corporations, Tax 1, Commercial Law, Secure Transactions, Employment Law, and Intellectual Property Survey. I think Dean Jones was just emphasizing some of the really major classes, but I'll let her take that question.
Yeah, I would say that that's just, that's a very long list. Those are all good basic foundational classes. And I think depending on what area you want to go into, you would choose one or more of those classes. But I don't think it's good advice to say to every student you should take all of these classes. The ones that I listed are the ones that almost every student takes. Almost every student takes corporations. Most students take Tax 1. We really and strongly encourage criminal procedure and evidence. So those are the courses that are considered foundational. The other ones are basic courses in various fields that you might go into, but they're not necessarily things that every student ought to take. I mean, everybody, yeah, if you could take everything, you should take everything, but obviously that's not realistic. So yeah, so sorry about the discrepancy. I just wanted to kind of give you more targeted advice.
There's one more question here about the latest registration time. Again, I can't confirm that, but I think it's like in the 4 o'clock hour. That's kind of the consensus that I've gotten from the folks in the Academic and Student Services office. And about the likelihood of not getting a class if your registration is later in the day. I think that there's a lot of change that happens during the summer even. So students who come in with the schedule, like what I've noticed when I've looked at my class roster for advanced legal research is that the students who I had in the beginning after registration are often far different from the roster that have like just before the beginning of classes. So there is some switching that happens during the summer. So if you can, like we don't have a formal waitlist system here at BC, but if you kind of keep checking and seeing if spots open up in courses that you're really interested in, there is a chance that you could, sort of make shifts before the fall semester begins.
Yeah, I would just reiterate that if you don't get into a course that you want to get into on your registration day, you shouldn't be too disappointed or upset that lots of changes happen. A lot of people or some students register for 17 credits, but they're only planning to take 14 or 13. So they're going to end up dropping their courses. So there's some courses that are very small enrollment and those might be harder to get into. But if you let your professor know you're interested, professor can, make an exception or let you in when the course enrollment drops. And then for the very large courses, if you really, first of all, the really large courses, the enrollment changes very constantly, and you're probably going to get into that course. And then if you're not, if it's corporations or evidence or professional responsibility, there are multiple sections and they're offered each semester. So if you don't get in, one semester, you'll definitely have a chance to take it the following semester. So the 2Ls are going to register first, so they're going to get the first bite at most of the courses. So so some might fill up, but again, there's lots of movement over the summer.
One question about if course A has a prerequisite say that's course B, can you take course B concurrently with course A, or does it have to be the semester prior? So my answer to that, I don't know, sorry, Dean Jones, do you have something to share?
Well, I would say, I mean, a prerequisite is a prerequisite. A co-requisite means you can take it at the same time. But if you have a question and you really want to take a course and you have a good reason and you haven't satisfied the prerequisite, you can email the professor and ask, and they will tell you, no, absolutely, you do have to take this course first, or it's okay if you take it as a co-requisite. But if you do that, you have to realize that most of these students and most of the other students in the course have taken the prior course. So you may be at a slight disadvantage, meaning that there's going to be knowledge assumed that you're not necessarily going to have.
Yep, great. Are there any discussions at the moment about whether the fall will also be on Zoom? I know things are up in the air, that it's hard to predict, but I'm concerned about having another pass-fail Zoom semester.
We don't know. We're hoping not. We all want to be back in our offices and in the classrooms. And the just too far away to know exactly what's going to happen. Again, we're all hoping to be back in the classrooms and in our offices. I don't know that even if we were online for part of the semester, we would necessarily do pass-fail. I mean, the pass-fail is based on an emergency situation and it's sudden change. And I think going into next semester, I think we'll all understand where we stand. So I'm not sure that pass-fail is going to be the way we would go at that point. But these are things that nobody knows, so it's almost not worth time, speculating.
Right. So everyone registers on the same day, April 22nd, but 2Ls have the early time slots. Is that correct? That is not correct. So 2Ls, the registration for them opens on April 21st. And so 2Ls who are going to be 3Ls, the registration for them opens on April 21st, and 1Ls who are going to be 2Ls, the registration for you will open on April 22nd. Okay. All right, those are kind of all the questions that have come in so far. I'll say, feel free to keep sending them in. I will say that Academic and Student Services is, of course, available to answer your questions or direct them to the correct person. So if you write to us at lawacastu, LAWACASTU @bc.edu, we're monitoring that email address during all business hours and try to get you a response as quickly as we can. So feel free to write with more questions there. All right, there's one more that came in. When you say you specialize in one or two areas, is it possible for these areas to be very different? Or do you think that this will be difficult?
Is that for me?
Yes.
No, it's not difficult. I mean, first of all, there's lots of courses that overlap with various areas of law. So, I mean, you could say, you want to be a corporate lawyer, but you also want to be prepared to answer employment law questions. So you would take a lot of corporate courses like corporations tax, maybe secure transactions, maybe securities regulation, but you could also take courses in employment law, like labor law or employment law, and still have time for interesting courses that maybe have nothing to do with either of those subjects. But again, if you don't try the subject areas, you're not going to really know what really grabs you.
Exactly. So nothing else coming in just now. Should we stay until 1:15?
No, I think if we answered questions, they can email, anyone who has a question can email me. You can email your advisor, or you can email lawacastu, and then the right person in the Academic and Student Services office will send you back an email with the answer to your question.
Yeah, so, well, we hope that this has been very helpful for you, and that you have a little bit more clarity on registration, and we will be in touch soon next week with the updated materials for you to look at. And yes, as always, we're always available for questions, and hope that everybody is doing well, and look forward to interacting with you virtually as much as possible this semester. Thank you.
Thanks.